And welcome, everybody. This is the Glenn Gerberg Weather and Climate Summit. I'm Dave Jones, the President and CEO of Storm Center Communications, and we've been here for the last few days having science talks. Many of you have been joining us. We have over 36,000 folks that have been reached through this live stream. We're in Breckenridge, Colorado. It's a little bit after 7 o'clock local time here, Mountain Time, and we're here tonight to talk about the extreme 2017 hurricane season. It's been an amazing one. Many people have been affected, and we're fortunate enough to have here at the Weather and Climate Summit several chief meteorologists who actually lived through it and brought their viewers through it, spending an inordinate amount of time at the stations, dedicating their time and efforts towards keeping their communities safe. So here's how tonight's going to work. I'm going to introduce a video that was produced by the Weather Channel on the 2017 hurricane season. When we come out of that video, I'll introduce our moderator for tonight, who is Paul Goodloe from the Weather Channel. And then Paul is going to talk a little bit about some of his experiences going from Harvey to Irma to Maria. And we also have Frank Billingsley here from Houston. So Frank will talk a little bit about his experiences. We really want to get online questions as well, if any of you are curious about things. And then we'll talk to Craig Setzer, who's the chief meteorologist at CBS 4 in Miami. And we also have Steve Weagle here, the chief meteorologist from WPTV in West Palm Beach. So please pull up a chair at your house, get the popcorn out, get your sodas together, or drinks, and water, that is, lots of water here. And we'll answer as many questions as we can. So we love doing this, and we thank the town of Breckenridge for hosting us here at the Glenn Gerberg Weather and Climate Summit. So let's take a look and kick this off with a summary of the 2017 hurricane season.
The 2017 hurricane season was epic.
Tragic. Historic. Hurricane Harvey started taking shape August 17th, rapidly intensifying just days later. But no one could imagine what was coming next.
It was a scene like this that was unending. It went all night and throughout the day. And the rainfall rates, they were up over 6 inches per hour. It felt like it was never going to end.
All the computer models that we looked at, all of our worst nightmares as meteorologists, you see those images and you're like, well, sadly, this forecast verified.
The rain kept coming. Before long, parts of southeastern Texas were covered in more than 5 feet of water.
It's terrifying to see these waters rising and not knowing what to do.
This is a street, not a river. Seeing just family after family after family doing whatever they can to try to get to higher ground.
More than 120,000 people were rescued from floodwater. 203,000 homes damaged or destroyed.
This really gives you a feel for how powerful water can be. And to watch this entire roadway collapse, just astounding.
According to the governor of Texas, Harvey could end up costing around $170 billion. But this hurricane season was far from over.
Irma spent 3 days as a Cat 5, setting a new record for that in the Atlantic. It also made 7 different landfalls, each as a major hurricane. Irma was a beast.
Hurricane Irma made one of its landfalls in Cudjoe Key, Florida, with winds of 130 miles per hour. It made another on the state's west coast.
This is an eye wall.
Here's Bettis in Naples. He's getting hammered in the eye wall.
Being in that eye wall, it was easily the strongest hurricane winds I'd ever experienced.
We're in Fort Myers, so we know this is coming toward us.
Irma ran up Florida, hitting other states, including Georgia.
Ooh.
You know, if this car was a little bit faster, that would have come down right on the driver and plow. And again, this is in Georgia. The winds weren't as strong, but they were strong enough.
More than 70 people in Florida were killed during Hurricane Irma, with the total damages estimated at $25 to $65 billion.
It's heartbreaking, the amount of destruction. I don't think anybody was prepared.
Right behind Irma, another monster, Maria.
We just couldn't get a break.
Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico as a Category 4 storm, 155-mile-per-hour winds at Yabucoa, while heavy rain over 2 feet fell in the mountains, triggering landslides.
I mean, it is just a river of mud.
You literally have this almost zero visibility in blinding rain. You can't see much at all. Wind gets in, it's got to find a way out.
The aftermath becoming one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern times.
People there didn't have much, and they're still offering it to us. We're like, no. But that's their spirit.
Seeing the aftermath of these storms on video is jaw-dropping.
When you look at Harvey, when you look at Irma, when you look at Maria, we've seen the worst hurricane season possible.
Indeed, this past hurricane season was a terrible hurricane season, and we're looking at reasons why that happened. We're going to be talking tomorrow, for those of you watching us online, in our morning session with Phil Klotzbach, who is going to summarize the 2017 hurricane season. He's from Colorado State University, and he'll also look into the 2018 hurricane season and what kind of signals are occurring that might lead us to believe whether it will be an active or an inactive season. So with that, I'd like to call up a veteran Weather Channel on-camera meteorologist. You probably see him all the time. He's where much of the severe weather happens, along with Mike Seidel and Jim Cantori. So I'd like to introduce Paul Goodloe. Paul, tell us a little bit about his experiences and then moderate the rest of the session.
All right.
Paul,
thank you, Dave. Thanks for the invite.
Sure.
And good evening, everyone, here in the room and also online. And I was in Harvey. I was in Irma, I was in Hurricane Maria, so unfortunately I have a lot to talk about, but we'll start off from the top and then we'll continue. We'll start with Hurricane Harvey, and that kind of started a stretch for me on the road of, I think, 25 of 30 days I was away from home. And I got the call, actually a text, about going out for Harvey during the eclipse, talking about October 21st. And I'm enjoying it with my family in North Georgia in totality. By 3 o'clock this afternoon, I get a text saying, hey, we might be sending you to maybe Brownsville or Corpus tomorrow, which happened to be my birthday. So I leave the evening of my birthday to San Antonio and get to Corpus for the preps. And at that time, again, on the eclipse day, Category 1 hurricane. You know, the worst that we're thinking about was the heavy rain potential in Houston, but nothing, you know, like it actually turned out to be. The forecast on the 21st might have been 18, 20 inches, rivaling Tropical Storm Allison back at the beginning of the century. So we knew it was going to be bad, but we didn't know what was on the doorstep there. And then, of course, you had the rapid intensification of Harvey, then the landfall, and I was actually in Rockport the day after landfall, the morning after. The devastation, the wind damage was just, it decimated everything in that area. And while we're covering that, all of a sudden, Houston blew up. And we actually had to leave the devastation there along the Gulf Coast there to get to Houston. Because all of a sudden now you go from several 100,000 people along that part of Corpus and Rockport and Fulton up towards Refugio, and I think is Schulenburg in the area as well.
That's a little west, but Victoria.
Yeah, Victoria. There were a lot of other areas we drove through to get to Houston, which had major damage. And I was like, why are we leaving this area? Why are we leaving the wind damage? And then I got to Houston, I saw firsthand what happened. And then not too later, I was sent to Florida to cover Irma. And initially I was in Marco Island on the west side of the state. And all the forecast cones were up the East Coast, into Miami, into West Palm, and then in the Keys. And slowly but surely, it kept getting pushed farther and farther west. Next thing you know, they'd move us off of Marco into Naples, and Naples got hit directly with the eye wall. And I got to drive home because there was no flights back to Atlanta. And about 2 or 3 days later, I get a phone call. This is during the National Weather Association convention, so a lot of my colleagues were not in town, and I was in town recovering. will you go to Puerto Rico? And that's when I really had to sit back and take stock in what I do and my family that I'm leaving behind to go into an island with an approaching major hurricane and knowing that I won't get out for at least a week. You know, my team, my producer, photographer, I told them in the airport in Atlanta, I'm like, hey, be prepared. This is, I think it was a Monday we left. I said, be prepared. We will not get out and get back home for at least a week. At least a week, maybe 10 days. You know, we brought food and supplies with us like we always do. But, you know, we weren't ready for total devastation on that island. I have some pictures I'll show you later on. But yeah, I was in the 3 big ones this year. So I guess I got to move around. But there were some of my colleagues here in the local stations who didn't get to move around. They got to stay in that location from beginning of the forecast to the end to even now with the recovery. I want to bring up our first member of our panel today. It's Frank Billingsley from KPRC in Houston.
Hello.
And
This one?
yes, please use that. Frank's been with KPRC for 29 years.
Since 95. I started at our competition in 89, but I've been in Houston since 89 and a weather guy since 82.
So you are definitely ingrained in Houston, not a
Yep.
stranger for tropical weather and hurricanes.
No.
And let's go back to the eclipse day. Again, the rest of the world, the rest of the country was all
focused.
tied up on the eclipse. I mean, the Weather Channel blew out coverage.
Oh, and so were we. You know, my weekend guy and my producer were out there with our sunglasses, you know, our eclipse glasses, and I put it on Facebook, and I said, you know, 3 meteorologists walk into an eclipse, you know, and it was all the focus was on that. You'll recall that Harvey was expected to maybe fall apart a little bit over the Yucatan and come into the Gulf as a weak tropical storm, strengthening maybe
To a Cat 1.
maybe to a weak Cat 1. And if you look at that rapid intensification, that was on August 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
By the 25th, we had a Category 4 hurricane hitting right where you were in the Rockport area. Now, what's important about that is that's the worst case scenario for the Gulf of Mexico, because we went through Alicia back in 1983, and we got a tropical intensification from nothing, zero, to a full 115 mile an hour Category 3 hurricane that hit Galveston in 30 hours. 30 hours. This was 48. So you put a storm like that just 100 miles to the north, and if that storm is coming into Galveston and a population of 6 million people versus the couple of 100,000, how can you even think about evacuation? I mean, you just don't have time. So this is the worst case scenario that, in terms of the wind damage, happened to our south, which was a good thing. Bad for them.
Right.
But you know, location.
Let's talk about the water damage, because when the first
Right.
models came out, they're saying 15 to 20 inches, which is less than half of what actually happened.
And let me tell you two rules of thumb I have. One is, in our tropical environment, you can take what we call the QPF forecast, the qualitative precipitation forecast, the rainfall forecast that comes down. You can take that and you can double it. And that bullseye on Houston had 16 inches. And I put on my Facebook page, I said, folks, double it to 32, because warm tropical air, as you know, can hold a whole lot of moisture. And as we saw, as your presentation verified as well, 6 inches of rain per hour. Now, folks in Breckenridge, if you do a 10 to 1, can you imagine 60 inches of snow per hour for 12 hours? Now, physically, it can't happen because the thermodynamics don't work that way. But, I mean, it's an interesting comparison to look at that. So that's one rule of thumb I have. You don't always just double the QPF. But if you've got the right warm tropical environment, you can just about say someone somewhere is going to see at least 32 inches of rain. The other rule of thumb, and I learned this when I went to Houston in '89, if you take the motion of the forward motion of the storm and divide that number into 100, that will give you a very good estimate of how much rain that tropical system can drop. So if it's moving 10 miles an hour, 10 into 100 is 10 inches of rain. If it's moving 20 miles an hour like Andrew, 5 inches of rain. If it's moving 5 miles an hour, 20 inches. I mean, the faster it moves.
Harvey wasn't moving fast. Then it
Thank
stalled
you.
117 hours over land.
And I put that, I made a graphic, and I told them that calculation, and I said, look, if this is moving 2 miles per hour, that's 2 into 100, that's 50 inches of rain. If it's moving 3 miles an hour, that's 33 inches of rain. And that's the kind of movement we're going to see on this. It's going to move a little bit, but basically so slight that we're going to see this forecast of anywhere between 20 and 50 inches of rain. But it's possible, and sure enough, it verified.
Let's take you back to, I guess is it Saturday night or Sunday night when the heavy rain really started?
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah, Friday we got some pretty good doses of rain.
You saw the bands over the Gulf coming in.
The feeder bands.
Right, and they didn't stop.
And there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of them. And talk about location. I mean, some people were getting the 5-6 inches of rain per hour. Others were getting 2 to 3. If you look at the final tally on this, you're at anywhere between 22 inches minimum across our part of Texas. 22 minimum to maximums of 60, with a general average in Harris County, which is a 4 million person county. The average there was 36 inches of rain, 3 feet of rain.
Now,
that was the average.
You've been in Houston forecasting for 29 years, right?
Well, yeah, since '89, when we had 3. We had our first tropical storm, Allison, which was the name that replaced Alicia. so we get Allison, and we get Chantal, and then we got Jerry, our latest hurricane ever to hit the Texas coast, October 16th, 1989. So we get all 3 of those. And then we have a few pretty good storms like Francis in the 90s. And the 90s ended up for us being fairly quiet compared to the 2001. We have Tropical Storm Allison. I sat and watched that one drop 3 inches of rain per hour for 12 hours. That was a max of 42 inches of rain. The average for that was about 18 inches of rain across the area. But that was our high bar, was Tropical Storm Allison. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we had 2005. So we went, and we didn't get touched, technically.
With Ike.
We did not get touched in 2005 with 28 storms. But we had the Rita scare, which put all the traffic on the roads. Right. And then Ike in 2008, which was our big windstorm. That was our Irma, was Ike. The power outages that lasted for 3 weeks and all of the damage that we saw from that. But of course, Ike struck on the weekend that Lehman Brothers folded. So the country wakes up to a stock market that is in half, and we wake up to an island that's in half. You know, and so we were thinking the white horses were going to ride in. Nobody came. Nobody came. No national coverage to speak of. No help Houston, help Galveston, help Bolivar Peninsula. So it was up to us. I mean, we had to pull our boots up and just get out there and do it, and we did. And then it was relatively quiet until Harvey, and we've had some action.
Let's have a seat, Frank.
But certainly Harvey was, you know, the new game in town with that, as you mentioned, the bands that started that evening. And then I'm on with Justin Stapleton, my weekend guy, and he's at one computer and I'm at the wall, and when we're just going back and forth. How much is it now? How much is it now? And he's saying, you know, it's 5 inches per hour now. And this place has already had 6, and the comparisons are there. But you know what's going to happen, because this was our 3rd major flood for a lot of people in Houston.
Right.
In 2 years. We had the Memorial Day flood in 2015, and then we had the Tax Day floods in 2016.
And those floods were not tropical related.
They were not. Certainly not. Memorial Day flood was a front coming in. Mm-hmm. But you know what? Both of those floods, if you look back at the pattern, the El Nino pattern of those years, which was called Hell Nino, which was the hottest El Nino we've seen, you had a big high pressure sitting there over LA, basically. So the El Nino was directed up over Northern California, which actually helped their drought considerably. But Southern California got left out of the water. They got left out of the rain. It didn't help their drought at all. It helped Northern California. So now this jet stream comes right down through Arizona and Mexico, pulls in all this Pacific moisture, then starts grabbing the Gulf moisture and slides it right through Central Texas. So you have this big upper level 500 millibar low that's just sitting there pumping in from both sides. And that lasted for 2 years. And we saw that in the Memorial Day flood. So when you say it's not tropical, I mean, it isn't like what you're talking about.
Not a hurricane.
It isn't a hurricane. It was not a hurricane related at all. But it was certainly the power of these kinds of lows. And that's what a hurricane obviously is, these kinds of lows that can just stall and sit there. And so there are neighborhoods in Houston now that have gone through 3 20 to 36 inches of rain floods, one a year, 2015, 2016, 2017. And I can't tell them that it won't happen again this summer. I can't say that.
Let's go back to Harvey and covering it as your station. You guys are KPRC, NBC in Houston. Your competitors, KHOU, which is their studios were located right off of Buffalo Bayou, Allen Parkway.
The CBS affiliate.
Right, with the CBS affiliate. When you got word and you saw the pictures of water coming into the station, they're evacuating their station.
Well, they had minor flooding in Allison. They had about 5 inches of rain. But now, you're right, now we're getting Facebook posts of 5 feet of water that's come in. Their signal is gone. They were off the air for, I don't want to say the number, I really don't know, maybe 16, 18 hours. And then they got the public television station and one of the affiliates in Dallas to help get their signal back, and they did a great job, doing that. But I felt for them because during the tax day floods in 2016, we have recently built a new building, and we built the building in our parking lot, and consequently had to park elsewhere. So we had the old building, and we were building the new building. So this grade for the new building sent water into our building. And we were off the air for 5 or 6 hours. So I felt their pain of not being able to be there every second of every minute of every hour for your viewers. It's what you want to do. And they're doing well, and they've recovered. But yeah, you start seeing the television stations, which is the communication
get the
center.
information out, right?
Yeah, and you want everybody to know, and so that was one avenue that suddenly stopped because of that water coming in from Buffalo Bayou. And they're not rebuilding there, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I heard. And let's talk about just the station in general, even you and your personal experience, because this was hitting everybody. There was not just 1 or 2 neighborhoods like some of the other floods.
Yeah,
this was the entire metro area.
Well, and beyond.
Yeah.
I mean, north, south, east, and west of us. Galveston, right on the coast, was the most spared, believe it or not, from the storm. So these feeder bands, the way they were located, they just dumped over Galveston County, Dickinson, and then up toward League City, which is right over the county line into Harris County, and then into Houston. But even out, if there's anything that helped us, it's the fact that we had been in a lot of drought for the 3 months before, because that summer had been very dry. And so out to the west, where the rivers are, when they filled up, a lot of the land around them could handle some of the water. And we had not been so lucky with those other 2 floods. And so the rivers that we thought would be really high and maybe even top the levees did not. So that was just one plus in the plus column. There weren't a lot in the plus column, but that was one thing that was in the plus column. But when the storm starts coming in, we as a team, and there are 5 people on my team. We have a morning lady, Britta Merwin, and our weather producer, Eric Bray, our morning weekend, Cambrell Marshall, our evening weekend, Justin Stapleton, and myself as the chief. So we kind of turned that into a 3-man team because we had 2 Mets on for 12 hours at a time. So we went 1-to-1. But of course, 1-to-1 would turn into 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and 5 hours of sleep, and 9 to 6. So, but everybody was working really hard, and 2 of our Mets were working with their own homes in a neighborhood that was being threatened by levee breaking. So the stress of that, of your home and your family and your own personal life, but you're at work doing your job. So we were there the whole time, and we did not stop that schedule until the following Thursday. So from Friday to the next Thursday, we were working 12-hour shifts, if not more.
And you guys were on the air nonstop for days.
24-hour coverage, yeah, absolutely nonstop. I mean, what are you going to show? What are you going to do? Do you want to show this link? We put together a 5-minute video, and it was really to show privately. It's not really a public video, but it's to show people like our advertisers and the FCC how important local news is and how a local connection saves lives, because they have people they trust, they have people they see every day, and they have people that are familiar with their community. So that when we say, you have to get out of there, you have to move to a higher ground, they believe us, and they do it, and it does save lives. And so if there's ever any doubt about local television going away, it won't, it can't. And so this is what we put together that has a little bit of Irma in it because of our Florida affiliates.
Okay, let's take a look.
It is now 125 miles per hour. That's the strength of that Hurricane Celia was when it made landfall.
And you're expecting a lot of damage from the water and the wind throughout the night and into Saturday morning.
We have been praying for quite a while now shelter now.
The local television stations are covering the story, and they're delivering valuable, life-saving information to those people on a micro level.
Television news matters because it can get you the information you need in a life or death situation immediately.
It's a gut-wrenching job to do because we see the pain and we see the heartbreak, but we know that this is exactly where we need to be.
Because you see the water coming up and you see the time running out.
We're talking about rescuing people. We're talking about pretty much the whole area.
The person sitting in their home really only cares about what that storm is going to do to their home, to their loved ones. And being able to slice that information to each individual county, each individual community, was information well put to use by our viewers.
This storm has just brought on so many different issues, and one of those issues, of course, is the health and the condition of the water.
When you have people that have been through this kind of stuff, you're talking about experienced local TV. If you hear the sound of a train, take cover in a closet or a bathroom away from windows.
This is going to be one of the worst weather nights we've ever had in the last 30 years.
That's what we do. We provide information. We don't try to scare, but we do try to inform and help them prepare to keep their families safe.
And you can see such a difference when local television stations focus specifically on local communities.
I was stopped on a daily basis, if not several times a day, by somebody in the area who was watching our coverage and just wanted to give me a hug or just wanted to say thank you. And that's when it hit me. What we do matters.
We're not just a one-dimensional news gathering organization. We have to be there before, during, and after a storm.
Take a look at what we encountered here. We got lucky. Got real lucky.
The chances are that power is going to go out and people aren't going to be able to get that information off of their television. So this is their lifeline.
Rockport, Fulton, I mean, they're estimated that there are thousands of people up and down the coast who are without power tonight.
Digital played such an important role in this hurricane for us. We helped the community stay in touch with each other. We helped residents help each other.
We had people all over the country actually finding us because we were trending at the top for Google.
We're able to reach a lot more people and get information to them in many, many different ways, and that's the most important thing.
And then you also realize that we're all human, you know? We're all seeing this together, we're all dealing with this together. But we'll all recover together as well.
Look, there's more love than there is water out here.
Everybody's out here to help, and like they say, Texas strong.
At the end of the day, we're all members of the same community, and we have a very powerful tool that can save lives, has the ability to save lives, and to deliver very important information.
Local news tells the story every day, every show, every newscast of where we live. Good, bad, wonderful, disheartening, heartbreaking. This is where we live. And consequently, this is who we are. There's more love than there is water.
And I do remember that in Houston, people from outside the areas who were mildly impacted by the hurricane, the flooding, would come in. They had boats that they were fine. They'd come in and just rescue people.
And they called themselves the Cajun Navy.
That
Yeah,
was
all these
one,
people from Louisiana.
That was
all
one of
these-
several groups that,
Yeah.
that I encountered would come out
If
there
you
and
had
help
a
people.
boat, you were there helping.
I forgot who it was, maybe the county executive or the governor, somebody said, if you have a boat, come help.
Oh, Judge Ed Emmett.
The judge, yeah.
Yeah, Houston has a mayor, and then outside of the city limits into the county, we have a judge, but he's basically the mayor of the county.
Of Harris County, yeah.
Yeah.
He said, you have a boat, come out, and people did that, and it felt fantastic just to feel the love of people who they know their neighbors are in need, and they help them out.
And not to say that some didn't lose their lives helping others.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there was one electrocution of a young 26-year-old man who brought his boat and came to help and died. So you can't forget that part of it.
Right.
But there was great, but it shows the power of local media and coming together as a community. And it's, you know, whatever it is, whether it's wildfires or tornadoes, outbreaks, or hurricanes or floods, we all have to help each other when we need help.
And unfortunately, that wasn't the only disaster we had this summer during the hurricane
No,
season.
they're gonna just change your name from Goodloe to Good Job, because that's why they keep calling you.
So appreciate your time up here, Frank.
Yep.
But
I'll
sit
down
don't
here
go
and
anywhere.
bring
I wanna
somebody up.
Bring up Craig Setzer from CBS 4 in CBS 4 in Miami, and Craig's been in Miami for 18 years, chief meteorologist there. And
A chance to wear my winter clothes. You know, I don't get to ever wear a long sleeve shirt in Miami. So.
Although, hey, Miami got down to 39 the other day,
39
right?
in Fort Lauderdale a couple weeks
that's
ago.
almost
yeah.
Breckenridge weather.
Almost.
On a warm day. So let's talk about Irma, because on the heels of Harvey, about 2.5 weeks later, you have something brewing out there in really off the west coast of Africa. All the models were getting on this. It went through the British Virgin Islands, demolishing some of the islands there. Even a near miss in Puerto Rico didn't hit the island, but still they had 111 mile per hour winds, knocking out power for some of the islands there.
One thing about Irma was that in many ways we think Harvey helped us, because it raised the level of awareness of people that, wow, a hurricane can do damage, even though Irma was quite a different storm from Harvey. I put together a PowerPoint because they said, hey, you're doing a town hall. I'm like, town hall? I've never done a town hall. Do a PowerPoint. So the last 3 days, I'm like, PowerPoint. So at some point we can take a look at that.
Okay, but I definitely want to start you off with the change in the forecast, because initially your viewing area, which also includes the Keys there, and the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, you were pretty much in the bullseye, and that track kept changing. Some model runs farther east, more of the Bahamas, then farther west through the lower Keys. I mean, this must have been like the worst case scenario, because as the model runs change, and because of the shape of Florida and the projected path, you know, there wasn't much escaping this no matter what path Irma was taking.
So one of the things that we always try to encourage our viewers who now will look at the models and stuff is to not chase the models. Some runs they'll go this way, some runs they'll go that way, but if you're in the middle of that windshield wiper, then you're pretty much under the gun. And Miami was for quite some time, South Florida was. So we knew it was going to be a big storm. We knew we were going to see some impact. Our fear was that the core of the storm, the worst of the winds, those were going to come across the metropolitan area of South Florida, Southeast Florida. Unfortunately for the Keys, that's where they saw the direct hit. We still received almost Category 1 winds, Category 1 wind gusts, but we didn't receive the core, which would have literally devastated and changed the face of Miami-Dade and Broward.
And if people aren't familiar with South Florida, there's lots of high-dollar high-rises all along the beautiful coast down there, which is a great place to visit or live, but not the ideal location for hurricane-force winds, even, you know, a Cat 3 or Cat 4 like Irma was.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know if there's really an ideal location, but it really was something that because I lived there, really kind of frightened me, and I don't think I told anybody how scared I was the week before of what we were potentially facing.
And let's go to your PowerPoint and talk about what you went through during the various forecast track changes and also through landfall. And you guys had tremendous surge in Miami
We
as
did,
well.
and it was the first time the storm surge warning was exercised for South Florida. And on my PowerPoint, I say that this is how I lost 9 pounds in 7 days.
The Irma diet.
And this was pre the storm hitting. This wasn't even when the storm hit, because I was literally very, very worried, and my heart was racing, and I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be so bad for us. So this is a shout out to all of the meteorologists in the room. There's many of us here from around the country, and obviously when there is a big weather event, of course it's the meteorology degree that brings us through storms like this. So this all started about 11 days before the storm reached South Florida, when some of the models, and this one called an ensemble, which is many different runs of the same model, was spread from east of Florida to over Florida to west of Florida. And the pinks there and the reds, those indicated that those tracks were very strong Category 3, Category 4 storm possibilities. And one of the things we do in Florida is we talk about uncertainty and try to avoid what we call deterministic, which means it's coming here, it's not coming here. We just talk about there's a possibility it's coming here, and because it could be strong, we need to get ready. So here was the climatology for 9 days out. There was a less than 1% chance that the storm would come to South Florida based on previous storm tracks. So there was a little bit of well, maybe it won't come here, but the models were pretty insistent it was going to move into that higher probability. And this was the 8-day, the forecast cone, 8 days from it. And you can see while it's pointing towards South Florida, it's a long way from South Florida. So we deal with a major hurricane basically in 3 phases. There's the preparation phase, which is very, very stressful. There's the storm when it hits, and there's the recovery phase. And the preparation phase was where I lost all my weight. Bottled water, of course, very important. I went to the local hardware store and got all my shutter supplies well more than a week before, and there was one other guy there, and he said, yeah, you seem like you know what you're doing. And I said, I'm hoping I don't need any of this stuff. Put my shutters up literally a week before the hurricane came, because I knew once we got into that week with the threatening major hurricane, I wasn't going to have time to do that. And friends of mine from the National Hurricane Center did the same thing. They put their shutters up the weekend, which was Labor Day weekend, before Irma. So this is what my living room looked like 7 days before the storm. That's all my lawn furniture, patio furniture, and of course the gas grill occupying my living room, which of course you don't want flying debris out there. Here was the 6-day cone, and now of course South Florida very much concerned here, but it looks like the cone is pointing towards the Gulf, and of course we know that there was eventually going to be a turn more to the north. One of the things we use is what we call the tropical storm force wind probabilities, which were unusually high for a storm, the highest values I've ever seen on a storm, especially so far out. This was from almost 5 days before the storm was even into South Florida. Now, just a quick background on the meteorology and the models. Basically, it was this west-northwest track, and then eventually there was a kind of a turn, and then by Tuesday evening, still you can see a spread across South Florida from the eastern Gulf into the western Atlantic, and then eventually you can see kind of a turn up the east coast of Florida. But all the models pretty much agreed there was going to be a turn, and we knew where that turn took place would either mean we were going to be crushed in southeast Florida or we were going to be brushed in southeast Florida. And as we know, that's what eventually happened. There was the 5-day cone, and there's kind of a joke, which is if you're in the 5-day point, you're in pretty good shape. This forecast worked out amazingly well. That 5-day point from the National Hurricane Center verified almost perfectly on the position. The time was a little bit off there.
But only about 6 hours or so.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
actually, about 10 hours.
Yeah, 10 hours, because it made landfall about 9 a.m. So the history that was going through my mind was what we called the 1926 Great Miami Hurricane. It literally started the depression in South Florida before the rest of the nation followed. It was a Category 4. It was, in dollars corrected to today, still one of the most expensive hurricanes. And I had that in the back of my mind, and we had a newsroom meeting, and I eventually said those words, and you saw everybody turn white in the newsroom, knowing what the potential meant. So by day 4, our biggest fear was that this turn was going to take place. There wasn't going to be any land impacts or anything to weaken it, and by Sunday we were going to be dealing with a Category 4 making landfall in southeast Florida. So one of my biggest things is being aware of the societal response and conveying that message, because a meteorologist can convey meteorological information, but somebody who's been through hurricanes, like my colleagues here, know that you have to talk about what are you going to do, what do you need to be doing, and what do you need to be doing ahead of time. South Florida was already running out of gas by Tuesday before the storm hit on that Sunday. That picture was of a gas line And literally, there were cars following gas tanker trucks to gas stations, and then the police would set up basically how the traffic would go there. So there was a big run on gasoline. Lines formed in the stores for the pharmacies, and I started tweeting out what you should be doing. Freeze bottles, make as much ice as you can, things like that, bottles of water. Of course, the view from inside my house was somewhat restricted, and that's kind of you know what's going on there when there's a hurricane approaching. In South Florida, we evacuate for storm surge only, or if you're in a mobile home. We don't evacuate for the wind or for rainfall flooding. Broward County has a small evacuation area. Miami-Dade has a much bigger evacuation area, and this was the first time since Andrew that large-scale evacuations were issued for South Florida. The order went out. The estimate was that between 500 and 700,000 people evacuated. And the whole point is you don't have to leave the state, you just have to get out of the evacuation zone.
Normally, but with the path of Irma, it kind of went right up the state, and people were evacuating into Georgia, into Atlanta, which also had impacts from Irma. This was like the storm was following the evacuees.
Right. And there's a traffic congestion map there, which was the turnpike was literally at a standstill up through parts of Orlando. And then the other fear was that you would be on the road evacuating and run out of gas because gas station was running.
I was in Southwest Florida. People were evacuating from Miami-Dade going into Naples and Fort Myers, but you know, I even had friends who had family there. Should we come west? Like, well, no, stay where you are, because the track is changing and you want to stay. I think it was somewhere around West Palm they were located. I thought, stay there. It's better than coming out towards Southwest Florida.
Absolutely. And in Southeast Florida, we have the best building codes in the country for hurricanes. And so we always say, why would you want to leave an area that if you have shutters, you're more likely to survive to an area that's less prepared? And then you're kind of playing roulette with that. So the sobering moment came on Thursday evening when the acting director of the National Hurricane Center said on air what everybody was thinking, which was, if this hits South Florida, this is going to be a once-in-a-generation event, the big one for us. And basically that gave us the permission to kind of say, you know, guys, this is really serious if this hits us. And it was kind of the gorilla in the room that we hadn't really talked about until the director said something. So the warnings went up, the surge warnings went up, and then the storm made impact. And this was from Saturday afternoon. I had about 6 hours of sleep in the past 2 days, so I was doing pretty well. And kind of this is a short clip, I don't want to bore people, but this is a little bit of meteorology and mostly just what we're going to be doing. So let's talk about what's going on here. Clearly now the eye of Irma is within radar range because it is showing up there. You can see it well to the southeast of us, right there still battering, lashing the Cuban coast. And because a majority of the circulation from the center, north, east, west is over water, the storm still, as Mark DeMaria was telling us, it still has a lot of integrity. And when we say integrity, it means that things like land encounters and turns and a little bit of wind shear and stuff like that is not going to break this storm down. Really, the only thing that is going to break this storm down is going over land and going over it for a long period of time. And the problem with that is that the land that it's going to go over is where we live, Florida, right here. So we're seeing these outer bands. And so that was kind of the first part as we were getting into it. Now then by Saturday evening, the tornado warnings came, and there was a major feeder band coming in with, and this is what we call Doppler velocity, with all of these velocity couplets indicating rotation in the atmosphere, and the tornado warnings came out. And we kind of had a new issue because the tornado warnings were sometimes indicating the tornadic potentially storm was moving 90 miles an hour. Now for tornado chasers, that's, you just say goodbye to that. But this was something that we realized that we had to handle a little bit differently. Also by this time, we were starting to have people that were only listening to us on radio, so we felt it was best to just mention all of the communities in the area. And then did we say stay away from windows? Everybody was shuttered up. So we said just go to the middle of your house because you don't have to stay away from windows. Your windows are shuttered up. Fortunately, there were only 2 tornadoes, no damage with those tornadoes.
And it was pretty amazing just the duration, not only of all the kind of types of weather you went through. You went through the tornado warnings, but then the surge came. People thought they kind of dodged the bullet when the forecast was having it coming into Southwest Florida, but that Saturday or Sunday morning, I've been through so many, I'm losing track. Was it Sunday morning? Sunday morning.
Sunday morning the surge came in.
As early as 6 o'clock, first light. I mean, you're getting this massive surge across South Florida.
And you're seeing parts of downtown Miami, and if you Google or YouTube Brickell, Irma flooding. You'll see where the water was in parts of downtown Miami, and the streets looked like canals, and the water was up. There was even a payphone there. I thought payphones didn't even exist. It was halfway up the payphone. Back to it briefly because of my PowerPoint order. The tornado warnings. The one thing about the tornado warning that seemed to scare everybody, which I was surprised about, was this. We got more phone calls and more text messages and things that evening when people were like scared to death by that sound. And so I was surprised that when their screen and this popped up, that was such a scary thing. But fortunately, there wasn't. As I said, there weren't any tornado damages. So by Saturday night, this was the storm, and we of course, the cone tracks where the center is expected to be, and it's basically worthless when the storm is on top of you. So we were tracking basically the wind field, and this is a little bit of the Saturday night coverage.
First off, the storm now moving to the northwest. We talked about that. The compass heading the 0, 90, 180, 270, and 270 is due west, and 305 is more in that direction, like that, moving that way. And it's slow too, 6 miles an hour now. So it's slowly pulling away from the Cuban coast and slowly getting closer to the Keys in South Florida. 120 mile an hour winds still. Pressure has stayed at this level now, and what we would look for if the storm is going to try to reorganize and try to get strong again is that this pressure would start dropping and maybe even dropping quickly. So far, it hasn't done that. It's possible that the time that it's spent over Cuba has at least leveled off the intensification process, at least for a little while, until maybe more of the circulation gets over land. But so Category 3 moving northwest at 6 miles an hour. The wind field, it continues to grow, and this red area here, that's the 75 mile an hour hurricane force winds. This orange area, those are the hurricane force gusts, and this yellow area here is when we're starting to see tropical storm force winds now, and certainly we are, especially closer, further south you get, the stronger those tropical storm force winds are, and then eventually get more and more into the hurricane winds. So here's the future track, and these are the first few points here. The first one, that's the Sunday 8 a.m. 8 a.m. tomorrow right there, and the forecast point is practically on top of Key West.
Now, you could see there my face had this concerned look. I think it was frozen on my face because I looked at the video later, and I had that same concerned look. I think it had just been such a stressful situation for so long. Sunday morning, we saw landfall. Of course, the radar showed the eye wall coming into the South Keys, just missing Key West. There was landfall Sunday morning around 9, 10 a.m., and then after that, the storm continued to move to the north and really started lashing the southeast coast at that point.
Did you have contact with people in the Keys while landfall was occurring?
Well, we had a radio partner in Summerland Key, which is very close to Cudjoe Key where they had the eye wall, and we lost contact through the night, and then the phone rang, and I recognized the phone number, and I picked it up, and he said, "Hey, it's Keys Radio here," and I was like, "How are you on the air?" And he said, "Well, we're on generator." And I said, "How are you alive?" Because we didn't know what to expect in the lower Keys at that point, going through the eye wall. And they said, "Well, it's bad here, but," and click, I lost him. And so we knew the communication was up and down, but we were glad to hear at least from some of our people down there.
And was this the first time you had a major hurricane make landfall in your viewing area?
Well, we had Wilma come in 2005, and it hit the West Coast, so by the time it was on the East Coast, it wasn't a major hurricane. Later that morning, I thought, it's made landfall in the Keys. I can take a 2-hour nap, please. I asked management. They said, yes, go ahead. And then about an hour later, there was a knock on the door, and can you go back on? So there's one more video clip, if I may. Sure. And it's funny because this one, I'm speaking slowly, not for emphasis, but because I'm really tired. They knocked on the door where I had fallen asleep, and I was trying to organize my thoughts. So that's kind of the way that this clip went right here. So we had a little bit of water get into the studio, but here is about 1 o'clock on Sunday.
Always get updates at the top of the hour. We're going to take a break, Rudabeh and I, in just a moment, but Craig Setzer is here to take us through the top of the hour and tell us what we need to know. Craig.
Yeah, okay, so a couple days ago, I said something to everybody, which was, okay, and I know that a lot of people are listening to us on radio. So the first thing I'm going to say is everybody needs to take a deep breath, because before it was anxiety because of something coming, and now it's frightening because it's here. But everybody needs to take a deep breath, because we're going to get through this. And the next thing that I need to say is that there's two questions right now that most people have. The first question is it going to get worse? And the second question is, when will it end? And both of those questions don't have good answers right now, because the answer to the first question is, yes, it's going to get a bit worse in Miami-Dade and Broward, and it's going to end by tomorrow, but it's going to start getting better after the sun goes down.
Okay, so once again, that wasn't for emphasis. Real quickly, this is what we came out to the next morning after the storm. Of course, why you don't want to be on the beach in a storm surge. This was my neighborhood with some flooding, lots of palm fronds. The banners were pretty straightforward. We were on generator for 5 days at our station. Of course, there was issues with the power outages. Lake Okeechobee went up nearly 5 feet from the rainfall. This was my neighborhood with the piles out front. My swimming pool before the storm, I put my solar panels in the pool so it wouldn't blow away. And I raked my pool after the storm because of the debris that was in it. So that was my experience with Irma.
All right. Thank you, Craig Setzer from CBS 4 in Miami. Now, again, you're Miami-Dade as well as Broward County to the north, and north of you, and the Keys as well, but north of your viewing area is West Palm. I want to bring up Steve Weagle with WPTV, Chief Meteorologist there in West Palm Beach. You've been there in West Palm for 20 years.
Yes, I have.
And let's talk about your experience, Steve, because again,
well, actually,
early landfall forecasts were perhaps right there in West Palm or just south of West Palm.
Yeah, I like Craig said, I think we were all from the very beginning pretty sure that it was going to have some sort of impact on our area, and we just had to convey that to viewers. It was a very weird storm, this one, because people prepared a week and a half, and there were evacuations a week and a half in advance, not mandatory, just people leaving. I live on the northern Palm Beach County line where the Turnpike and I-95 come together. And even early that week, I would say 6 to 7 days before the storm was even a threat at all, there were massive traffic jams. And I would come home around midnight, 1 in the morning, and I would see people getting off the Turnpike and onto I-95 because the Turnpike was a parking lot all the way to Orlando. I'd never seen that before, not so far out. In Francis and Jean, you would see it, but in a storm so that we weren't going to have any impact for a week and a half, it was really incredible to see people preparing so early. And I call it the Harvey effect because people saw what Harvey was like. It scared them, and that was one of the challenges, telling people it's not going to be like Harvey. It's not a big rain event for us. It's a big wind event, potentially.
And what about, I know Miami had massive surge in parts of Miami-Dade and Broward. What about your viewing area? What was the biggest impact with Irma?
Well, power outages from the winds. Bob Sheets used to call hurricanes urban renewal projects. They come in, they clean everything out, and then your county, your area is much stronger. And that was the case with Francis and Jean in 04 and 05, and then Wilma. We had Francis, and there was debris everywhere. 3 weeks later, we had Jean make landfall in the identical area, in our viewing area, and there just wasn't the same type of debris around. A lot of that stuff got cleaned up, and then, 13 years later, we get this storm, and it wasn't a structural damage issue. And a lot of homes without roofs, like we saw in the earlier hurricanes. It was power outages. I mean, the entire state was without power. It's amazing.
And did your station go on continuously for the coverage of the
Oh yeah, it's an endurance test, and I look very much like Craig there. You just are trying by Sunday afternoon and evening, just try to concentrate on every word you say, because you're exhausted. And we've talked about it. We talked about it a couple of days ago. You feel like you've taken years off your life because, I mean, I don't know. I might have slept 2 hours in 40, maybe 45. I don't even know how long we were on. I do know we went off early Monday morning, maybe around sunrise. Well, that's when I went off. But it's an endurance test. It should be an Olympic medal. It's exhausting.
Now, if you think if there wasn't Harvey a couple of weeks earlier, do you think you'd have the same response to people evacuating well ahead of time and preparing to buying the extra water or food or batteries or even a generator just in case because of what they just witnessed?
Oh, it would have happened. It just wouldn't have happened so early. It was a massive hurricane. It just would have been the middle of the week when we started to get into the day 5 of the cone instead of a week and a half out. So I think the response was still there, and that's really our challenge in the future. Having people who are in good homes and who are not in evacuation areas stay there and not evacuate. Don't make the Turnpike and I-95 parking lots. Let the people who need to evacuate get out, and don't go far. Don't go to Orlando. I have so many people who went to Tampa or Fort Myers or Orlando that the storm was chasing them the entire time. And so we tell people, stay in your county or a neighboring county, try to find family or friends if you're in an evacuation area. Don't drive for hours and hours, because it's likely you're just going to be sitting on the turnpike in the middle of the hurricane.
And that wasn't the last hurricane we were dealing with either this season. And days after Irma, we're dealing with Maria. And I went to Maria, Puerto Rico, after again doing some soul searching, and even during landfall, I was actually afraid. I knew it was a Category 5. It weakened a bit, and I heard it referred to as a Category 4.9 as it hit Puerto Rico, the worst swath. I mean, almost diagonally through the country. And I think do you have video of landfall in Puerto Rico? We can put that up there.
Maria, right? Maria?
Yes, Maria.
All right, I'm right up.
So this was, I think I drove back from Irma, home for 3 or 4 days, then in Puerto Rico, and then about 3 days later, I'm dealing with the landfall of a major hurricane.
We're in the thick of this. I just measured, we're about within 30 miles of the northern eye wall of Maria, which will be coming basically over San Juan as we have throughout this morning. So the winds will only increase and then stay up on the backside as well. So we're in this for the long haul here in San Juan. But I just hope and pray that people on this island will survive this. And now we are dealing with the first landfall of a Category 4 hurricane. 1932, and the winds here are only increasing as the eye wall gets closer.
It's just not safe to be outside. Again, this is a protected area too.
We got 3.5 million American citizens here on this island. It's a territory of the U.S. And we had a pretty tough road with Irma about a week and a half ago, doing quite a bit of damage. Unfortunately, some people are still without power and even running water because of Irma, and now we're having a direct hit with Maria. And from now, basically through, say, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we will still be dealing with wind gusts easily in excess of 90 miles per hour. So it's not going to be any better until perhaps the sun starts to set tonight. So from sunrise to sunset, we're going through the heart of Maria here in San Juan. And again, I'm amazed that I'm somewhat protected and I'm dealing with wind gusts this strong here. So again, shelter in place. We have a place steps away that I can get to and get out of this wind. The weather reporting stations this half of the island have gone out. Again, with the wind so strong, power, at least to our hotel, went out around 1:30 this morning. We're on generator since then, and we've been getting stronger and stronger winds. And I have to keep telling you that we're on the backside of our hotel, the Hyatt Place, running on generator, and we're somewhat protected from the winds, and we're still getting the winds gusting well over 70 miles per hour back here, and that's on the protected side. I can see on the front side of the hotel, which is unprotected, the winds and the palm trees are not just blowing sideways. Some of them, the palm fronds, are blowing upward. That's how strong this wind is out here, not to mention the heavy rain coming through as well.
You can see some of the debris piled against the building, even the bottoms of the pumps. The covers have been ripped off. This is the Lutheran church here, the first Lutheran church built on the island, built in beautiful Gothic style here. Built in 1916, 101 years old, and definitely some damage to their beautiful stained glass windows. Take a look across the street. This used to be a building. Yes, it was an abandoned building, didn't have a roof, and it was originally built in the mid-1700s. Ducking more than 250 years ago.
but again, no match for the power of Hurricane Maria. The mayor here in San Juan said it might take 4 to 6 months to restore power. Driving around today, I see why. Everywhere we went, there was massive devastation. About 40% of the island still without power. And days after landfall, the governor saying, oh, by Christmas, over 90% should have power happen. And there are a lot of reasons why, potentially. But, you know, I got to tour the island 2 times because I was there for about a week during the hurricane, went back for recovery. And I remember leaving with, taking a helicopter ride with Customs Border Protection. Fantastic men and women there who do a great job day in, day out, but you know, their recovery and rescue efforts was phenomenal as well. But I asked the pilots, I'm like, I hear reports of hundreds and hundreds of mudslides. Is that true? He goes, no. There's probably tens of thousands, if not 100,000 mudslides. And I got some pictures up here showing mudslides, and it's just, it's truly, it's amazing. Everywhere you look, there were mudslides. This is from the helicopter. And by the way, you have to remember, Puerto Rico, it's a tropical island. It should be filled and covered with lush green canopy of leaves. You see the mudslides, see waterfalls you normally can't see because you normally have tree cover and branch and leaf cover. You don't have that. Everywhere you look, there are mudslides, and they go on and on and on. And if you've never been to Puerto Rico or flown over Puerto Rico, about 75% of that island is either hills or mountains. And the mountains go up a little over 4,000 feet. And they got, just from the hurricane, about, say, 25 to 35 inches of rain just for that. But every single day it rained. Every single day. Highs in the low 90s, dew points in the low 70s, and it rained every day. Again, another waterfall and stream you normally couldn't see from the air, but there's not a leaf on a tree that you can see that is still standing there. And they went on and on and on. This is just, what, 3 hillsides, and you can count maybe a dozen landslides. And there are people and communities cut off in the mountains. We went back 2 weeks after landfall, and we were the second supply of drinking water to some of the mountain communities. And it's tremendous devastation, and it's still a long way from recovery there. And if you Google USGS landslide map, you'll see a map of Puerto Rico, and it shows you where all the landslides are, and it's outside of the coastal areas, it's everywhere else. And it's, you know, it's and the damage is everywhere as well. I think I had another picture of it hills. I was showing it last night at dinner. Puerto Rico is a hilly and mountainous island, and it looked like New England today in January. Not a leaf on the tree, and this was in September. That was the power of the winds and the damage on this island. And you know, I was in Texas for Harvey. Great spirit of people helping neighbors, strangers, wonderful. I was in Florida. You know, the spirit of people helping on the back of Harvey, knowing that, hey, we have to help our neighbors, and people taking in strangers when they needed shelter. And then I was in Puerto Rico, and you know, this is not to put down what is still going on in Texas or Florida in terms of recovery, but the people in Puerto Rico went through so much and are still going through so much. And this is, and like I have family in Texas. I have good friends in Florida as well. The spirit of the people in Puerto Rico blew me away after I was blown away by the people in Florida, and especially Texas as well. Strangers helping strangers. And it hurt my soul to see that. And I almost feel personally attached to it. And it's funny because I got family in Texas, but I still feel more attached to Puerto Rico because of what these people went through and going through it with them. And even coming back, they're offering me food and drink, and I'm like, no. We brought all our stuff with us, but you know, they're still willing to give you food out of their house, what little they have. And it's a struggle for them daily. But their spirit, I know they will recover because of their spirit. I think we have a question.
Yeah, sort of. Jennifer Gavina, Paducah, Kentucky. Paul and applaud all of you for the job that you did. I know it was probably very difficult. I do have a question. First, I know with Puerto Rico, the tropical rainforest there is one of the biggest tourist attractions on the island. And I did see recently that it's starting to flourish again. And that was like really good to see for the heart, to see that at least that was starting to come back for them, because that was really, really difficult to see that entire rainforest was just deforested. I mean, it was stripped. My question to you is, many of us have been through natural disasters, but nothing to that scale. Did you feel yourself at some point get to that different tone with people? The level of seriousness that comes along with it and the change in your tone? And then also, how did you battle your emotions during the storm? Was it, did you just turn them off? Or did you, at times, did it overcome you?
Wow, where do I start? It's great that the rainforest is coming back. Even 2 weeks later, I did see new leaf growth on a lot of the trees, so that's good. And plus, they keep getting the rain. The change of the tone, probably the day before, the evening before landfall, beautiful sunset in Old San Juan. You ever been to San Juan, the old castle? I mean, it's just a lot of history there. It's a beautiful place. And the funny thing is, the national park people there in San Juan, again, that old town is a big national park, they were housing the staff from St. John that was devastated by Irma. And that island, talk about a national park, wiped out. Most of St. John is a national park, and it might be 2 years before they come back. They were staying in San Juan, and now here comes Maria, making a direct hit on that island. And the director there, that region, he said, this fort's it's been here for hundreds of years. It's gonna be okay, but he's concerned about the surrounding area. And sitting there on this structure that was built hundreds of years ago, and all the history that went through that area, and I'm seeing the beauty of the sunset, and I know that when the sun comes up the next morning, it's gonna be a different landscape. It's gonna be a different tone. And that's when my tone hit, I hope that people are that this island will survive this.
Don't be deceived by the nice and beautiful sunset.
Right. And you're in the tropics. People vacation there. Tourism is the #1 driver of the economy on that island, and that's, in the crapper right now. I mean, the hotels are back open, but people think, oh, Puerto Rico, Maria, I'm not going there, but it's still beautiful. Even 2 weeks later, I saw the beauty there, and I see why people go and live there, and that's why I tell people, why do people live in Puerto Rico? Look what happened. If you ever go to Puerto Rico, it's a beautiful place. Not a bad, plus it's in the U.S., the U.S. citizens. There's no passport, it's part of the U.S., a beautiful part of the U.S. The emotions, it got tough when we had to get kicked out of our hotel. And now, the whole point of all of us who work in the business is not to be part of the story. You want to cover the story, but you don't want to be part of the story. And now, we're looking at scrambling, trying to find a place to stay. Most hotels don't have power. There might be one or two. They're, of course, all booked up. And you got the first responder hotel, which is all booked up. And we were going to be stuck out, perhaps going to a shelter ourselves. And that's the scary part, and knowing that there's no light at the end of this tunnel for a couple more days. So that was concerning. I wouldn't say I lost it on air, but I got emotional on air one morning, and I heard stories about people saying, oh, now there's looting going on in San Juan, and we witnessed a little looting. And I said that if someone's walking out of a store with a TV, that's looting. But I saw someone carrying a case of water. I'm not saying that's right, but
they're trying to survive.
They're trying to survive.
Yeah.
And again, it's not right, but I understand why they're doing it, and that's what people are doing. And I said that, and I'm like, we're getting kicked out of our hotel. Our hotel was sheltering us and a couple other 100 people. The sister hotel lost power. They were staying with us as well. Now you're having an extra 400 or 500 people without a place to go. And that was pretty emotional.
So if I could just throw in there, because, and I know emergency responders deal with this, and probably some of you in the room have dealt with this, but when a storm is coming to your hometown and your neighborhood, there's a moment when you leave your house going to work and you know you're going to work a long shift and you don't know if you're going to come back to what you're leaving. It's a very sobering moment that when I come back from work, this may be destroyed, it may be damaged, I may not be able to live here for a while, and you look at everything in a different way and you kind of capture that in your mind and you keep that with you because you think, I may not recognize this again in my lifetime. And friends of mine at the National Hurricane Center were afraid that their children's lives would be changed if the Category 4 went right through Miami-Dade and through Broward. So fortunately, we didn't deal with that. My emotions, I just kept thinking, do your job, do your job, do your job. And I'm sure the military goes through that with training too. My only issue was that my mother, who is in assisted living, lives in the Tampa area in Clearwater, and she was visiting her sister in Cincinnati and decided to come back 3 days before the storm and texted me as she was getting on the airplane. And I said, that is the worst possible decision you could make. Because for me, I was thinking, you don't know what you're going into. And she said, the models have it, and I know all the meteorologists in the room know what that means when your parent says, but the models are saying this. I said, I cannot deal with this right now because I've got all of South Florida scared to death. So we went through Thursday and Friday, and the models shifted to the west, and here comes the storm at the west coast. And I thought, this is the worst case scenario. Now we're going to make it, and my parents are going to be lost on the west coast. So that Sunday night, South Florida was improving weather-wise, and it was getting worse and worse in Tampa. And they were she's up on the 4th floor in assisted living. And I called her about 10:30, and she said, it's really loud, and the windows are bowing in. And I said, okay, well, just stay away from the windows. And then I called her back an hour later, and she said, I'm in the bathroom. I've got a blanket, a towel, and a pillow on the floor. It's so loud. And I thought, okay, well, at least you're in a facility. And then I called back like 2 hours later, and I was surprised I could get through that the cell phones were still up. And I said, where are you? What's going on? And she said, I'm in the hallway, and there's other residents here. And I thought, okay, you're with people. And she said, but it's so loud. The wind is so loud. And I thought, I could judge how bad it was by what the other people were doing. And I said, well, what are the other residents doing? And she said, they've all taken their hearing aids out. They're fine. And I thought, my mom's going to be fine. This is going to be okay.
Can I speak to just that very quickly? Our station's pretty tight. I bet a lot of you all work at stations that are pretty tight as well. So we don't mind giving a hug to each other. You know, we can turn it so the emotions on and off. And when you see someone, you know, especially workers whose own homes are flooding or may flood and are in a serious problem. So we're good about that. I don't have a story like yours. I'll call my parents during a tornado warning in Arkansas, and we're watching the ball game, you know, and so I know what you're going through there. But I would say this: social media, and I've heard Mets say, well, there's the meteorologists, and you know we got to watch them. I think they really, when the going gets serious, my experience in Houston is that they're pretty good about it. And they're you know, when you're out there forecasting 50 inches of rain, that's a pretty big forecast. And you're going to get people on your Facebook page saying, "Oh, come on, you're hyping this. You really must need viewers." The other people are saying, "If he's saying it, you better listen to him." And there's 90% saying, "I'm with them," and 10% saying, "I think you're hyping it up." So the seriousness of it, I think, was felt. But again, it goes to what I was saying about the video that we put together, that you have to have local people, you know, that you trust. Not to say that the Weather Channel feels local, because whenever you're in my neighborhood, they start calling me saying, "Why is the Weather Channel here?"
Funny story about that. Wherever I am, you know, say, "Oh, well, is it going to hit here? Where's Jim Cantori?"
Right.
"Oh, Jim's not here. Oh, we're okay." But, you know, again, I was in Corpus, and Jim was in Galveston, Houston.
Yeah, I know where Jim was.
Then he came to Corpus, and so did the hurricane. I was in Marco, then Naples, and he was down in South Florida on the East Coast. And then the model shifted, and Jim came up the road in Fort Myers. So, you know, I don't know if I'm the bad luck charm where these things go, but for the longest time, it was always Jim Cantori. People who hated to see Jim Cantori in the neighborhood. They knew the storm was going to be there.
To your question, Jen, there was, I've been wall-to-wall for, I don't know, 5 or 10 hurricanes now, 30, 40 hours. Craig and I have talked about this quite a bit. There was, this one just felt different. There was a track, I think, on Wednesday where it was a Cat 4 pretty much going up I-95. And I'm in an evacuation area. So I know where I'm going. But I dropped my wife off at a friend's house. And as I'm pulling down the driveway, I thought, it's different this time. I just felt different. And I took a photo and I put it on Facebook of her standing at the front door. It went crazy because I now connected myself with 3 million other people in the viewing area who are doing the same thing. So, and as far as the emotion, and we've talked about this quite a bit, I feel like we're so focused during the storm covering it that there's no time for that. But our breakdown period is after, where I had to take days off because it's so intense and you're so focused for 40 or 50 hours. I mean, literally focused with no sleep, and you just mentally, you don't break down, but you come pretty close.
And normally we're just covering the storm. Storm's over, we're out of there. But Harvey was different. Harvey was flooding, slow motion disaster. Rain stopped, but the water kept rising. I was on that energy corridor out there just south of I-10, not quite at Katy, and we're in this neighborhood where people are going in rescuing people, and here's this woman, probably early 80s, and her grandson's trying to get her on the back of a jet ski so she can go into her house and get whatever belongings might still be dry. And she just physically couldn't get it. They tried to get her on there, and she was in, she was a nervous wreck. She was in tears. She was talking to me, and this is live. This was not planned or taped, just live. And she's saying, telling me the story how the night before, she got a knock on the door, lights were out, and some guy was at the door, didn't know who it was, and it was her neighbor in back of her. She didn't really know him that well, and she says, "You have to get out." I can't. My husband is here. He's on hospice. He's in a hospital bed. I can't lift him. Like, don't worry. Get in the truck. I will get me and my son or whatever will get your husband out. Pulled him out, took him to another nursing home, and he's on hospice. He has days to live, and that's all her belongings in that house. And she's telling me the story, and she's trying to spend as little time as possible getting her belongings and then going back to her husband, who's maybe hours to live at that point. And she's telling me the story, and at that point I had lost my father, who was on hospice care maybe a year and a half earlier, and I'm glad the photographer was on her because I'm getting watery. And this is the part of the story that gets me the most, is the people. I can deal with the science. I mean, we all can do that. But when you deal with people who are currently being impacted and their lives forever changed, that's when the human in you starts to kind of break down.
And those stories you're talking about, our reporters were finding one after another, after another, after another, and they do. But I mean, the flood part is it only helps in that you have power, and so you can communicate, and cell phones are all powered up and they're all working, and computers are powered up and they're all working, and internet connections are all working. So you have this huge amount of communication going on. So consequently you have huge numbers of stories like this that you're seeing 24 hours a day. And we finally wrapped it down to less coverage, sort of listening to our viewers saying, I can't take it anymore.
Fatigue.
I just, and like you say, you just need the days off, and I need to rest. But the stories still are there.
Quick question, Frank. We're all, as meteorologists doing this, Doug Cameron from WRC in Washington, we're reporting on this as well. And we don't know Houston like you know Houston, and we hear things like Buffalo Bayou. And immediately in your head, you're thinking to yourself, this is a bayou like Louisiana bayous that maybe you've seen before. This is a man-made concrete area right through downtown that has been named a bayou simply because it sounds better than concrete downtown. Is that correct?
Not quite. Buffalo Bayou is actually what founded Houston, because it was originally a port city. And so the Allen brothers came down from New York and created Houston along Buffalo Bayou. And so it is a real bayou. It's been expanded, and that's the problem. There's so many natural bayous, and they're basically little rivers.
But didn't they concrete over a lot of them, which exacerbated
in order
the
to
flooding?
expand them, yeah. But we have issues with pipes from the neighborhoods. I mean, our streets are built for flooding. We have wide streets, and the idea is that if you get a manageable amount of water, the rain stops, it'll drain quickly, and it'll keep you from flooding. And often that works. But when it's overpowered, the sewer system has to go down to a pipe. That pipe has to go to a bayou. That bayou has to go to the Gulf of Mexico. And so it's this pipe down here that gets overpowered, and so the water up here on the street can't get down there anymore. And so it starts coming into the yards and can also back up the sewer system. So even people who were protecting their yards, they're getting the flooding from their toilets and their plumbing system. They're getting all of that water coming in regardless. There was one guy that wrapped his whole house with duct tape and plastic, but the bathroom got him. You know, I know.
We have one question from online, and we actually have an answer in a video format. The question was, how has GOES 16 contributed to the hurricane season? How has it really helped understand what's going on with storms and all that sort of stuff? So we have a video that we're going to run that I think answers that online question, and then I can bring you guys something to drink here while the video's playing. So let's go ahead and see that.
T-minus 30 seconds and counting.
Beginning of a new era.
ECS reduced for launch. Roger.
For us meteorologists.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go, goes R.
5, 4.
Night launches.
3.
Now watch it go up.
2, 1. And liftoff of NOAA's GOES R, America's most advanced weather eye in the sky.
My heart was pounding out of my chest.
Elevating environmental intelligence to new heights and saving lives.
2 decades ago, we never would have thought that as a storm was spinning up off the coast of Africa, that we would have some tantalizing clues. It would spin up to a Category 5 hurricane a week, 10 days in advance. But that's what we have seen.
It was 10 plus years in the making. There's certain things that are really crucial with weather, and one of them is timeliness. If you gather information but you can't process it or understand what it is and how it can be utilized, you miss things.
If you build into that satellite the ability to do rapid scans every 30 seconds over a rather large area, you can start seeing the evolution of these weather systems with a lot more fidelity.
We started working with GOES 16 sometime around maybe 2005 is when we first started trying to figure out what information we would get from GOES 16 once it is eventually launched into space.
When I first heard about GOES, I thought it was going to be a game changer because of its geostationary location and its value for extreme events.
This has opened up new knowledge for both meteorologists forecasting the weather and for those of us trying to understand it.
We were making a quantum leap. We were making the biggest investment and improvement in the entire history of the GOES program.
We've always had sort of some inkling that we could do what GOES could do, but we needed the technology. And this is a beautiful marriage of advanced technology and engineering and science.
The GOES-R mission covers quite a spectrum of applications. We watch and help predict the severe weather, thunderstorms, the tornadoes, hail storms, fog for aviation, fire weather prediction, space weather forecast, solar events. This is all part of the mission of GOES-R.
The Weather Service and with NOAA's satellite division on the kind of next generation of technologies, there's kind of 3 areas where they wanted us to focus. Timeliness of the data. Can we do it faster and get it to the forecasters in a quicker time frame? Clarity. They wanted more clarity. The other thing that they wanted was the ability to see more insight into the storms. As we designed the ABI, the Advanced Baseline Imager, we took into account those 3 aspects. I think we really hit it out of the park.
We knew we would be able to see details of the weather that no one had ever seen before. It took many years working with industry to get that capability and the design just right to do what the scientists knew could be done.
The tropical storm force winds currently extend 220 miles.
I think this summer would be a really good shakeout. I think it was more of a shakeout than they could have ever imagined.
GOES-R was still moving to its final position, and it hadn't been fully deemed operational as far as all the quality control testing that they wanted to do.
Even though it was not operational, the data were being used in an operational sense.
And it was amazing. Harvey underwent rapid intensification, and we saw that in the hours before it made landfall in southeast Texas.
Better resolution, temporal, spatial, really being able to see the storm like we hadn't seen it before.
When forecasting an extreme event, seconds, not minutes, not hours, literally seconds can mean the difference between life or death.
I definitely think that lives were saved because of GOES-16.
Harvey blew up so quickly. I think without GOES-16, I think Harvey could have been much worse.
Shortly after GOES-16 had been launched, there was a outbreak of wildfires in Oklahoma, and that data is initial and as preliminary as it was still being used by decision makers. These fires were rapidly evolving, the winds were changing directions, and GOES-16 proved invaluable for being able to know exactly where the fires were going and where to position and pre-position firefighting.
When you have something like a Harvey or an Irma or a Maria, imagine what it would have been if we couldn't have given those warnings.
All this started during the engineering checkout phase, and I don't recall that ever happening before. What GOES-16 has brought to the table is a much more impressive ability in terms of the time resolution and seeing the almost continuous development of these storms.
There's a few surprises. We're able to see further down into the atmosphere than we were previously. And we've seen some examples where we can now detect where thunderstorms are going to form before any clouds have formed at all. So it's completely clear skies, and we start to get an idea of where the storms will form, say, in the next 2 or 3 hours. And that's a new capability that we didn't necessarily anticipate from earlier.
There are blogs and tweets and articles where meteorologists can't get enough of the data and the information.
One of my first comments about GOES-16 was that this system was going to redefine mesoscale meteorology for us.
The full complement of instrument on GOES runs the gamut from observing severe storms to space weather on the sun. GOES is a sort of a foreshadow of where we see the field of Earth remote sensing going in the future.
The team is incredibly diverse. We have major corporations who are actually building all the hardware pieces, not only government, but we have thousands of people through academia because a lot of scientists are out in the university system.
Our students are using cutting-edge data as they learn about meteorology in our atmosphere. They're not just learning about it in textbooks. They have their hands on the data, using it in their weather things or using it in their master's theses or doctoral dissertations. So we are in an era where we have immediate access to the data, and we can use it both in an instructional capacity as well as a research capacity.
What the organization sort of learned is we can do this. We can look and really assess what could be, develop the technology to make it happen. It may take many years, but it's possible and sets you up for that next generation. Let's start working on it now. Let's look for the future. What is the potential out there? Let's start getting some excitement about what can be, because we know we can get there because we've just done it once.
The technology and the capabilities all come from people. It's really about the innovation that these people had and the vision that they could create this wonderful technology and make it work. And their vision has become reality.
Okay, coming out of this video, we do have another online question, and that online question is, why do you think we're seeing more extreme weather like this? So maybe, Paul, you could, give some input. You guys could give a little bit of reaction, and then I'll ask you one final question. about the 27 hurricane season. We've gone a little bit over. The online audience is giving you guys a lot of kudos for the coverage that you brought them through in the hurricane season, and we'll end it in just a few minutes. But Paul?
I have, I guess, two answers to that question. One is simple. It's climate change. You have more energy into any equation. You're going to have wilder fluctuations and extremes. You have more energy in the atmosphere. The atmosphere, especially on the tropics, is thicker, so you can have the ability to have stronger storms. And two, we populate now much more of the coastline. So we're going to have more impacts from stronger hurricanes. You have a lot more people living on the coastline. In the U.S., you look see in the Caribbean, most people live off the coast because they've been through this time and time again. Here in the U.S., you know, it's every, 12, 13 years we have a really active season in the U.S. So it's our population density along the coast with our changing and warming climate, which I think are the two reasons why we have more extreme weather and also more extreme impacts to us, people, in the U.S. from extreme weather events.
Well, and it's not just us. When, you know, the weekend of Harvey, 16 million people in Bangladesh were flooding. And then if you look at, just Google European floods over the last 2 years. Look at what has happened in Australia with hurricanes and wildfires. I mean, it is global. So I think your answer is spot on.
Excellent. Well, thanks. So the last question that I have for all you guys tonight, and thanks so much for taking the time to sit up here and share your thoughts and your experiences with the online audience. By the way, we've reached over 6,600 people tonight in this town hall meeting, which is terrific. And we really appreciate Breckenridge inviting us to come to their town to hold this Weather and Climate Summit. The last question I have is, what do you guys think? We've gone through the 2017 hurricane season. It's been phenomenal. It's been extreme. It's impacted so many people. How has this made you prepare to communicate for the upcoming 2018 hurricane season? And what are your thoughts? Paul?
My thoughts are, I go back to what I was saying before, the last time we had this many landfalls in the U.S. was 2005. Record-setting year. Not all the extreme as we had this year with I guess 3 Category 4 hurricanes hitting the U.S. But it's all about odds. This year is an active year, above average activity. Last year was an above average activity year, but did anything hit the U.S.? You had one, you had Matthew. You know, the year before that, above average year, but really no major impacts to the U.S. So this is not anything new. We will continue to have above active years. We're in that trend right now, but we go all the way back to Hurricane Andrew, 1992. Was that an active year? It was a below average active year, but you had Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 hurricane, making landfall in South Florida, then in Louisiana. But that's all they talk about before Maria in South Florida is Hurricane Andrew. So that was a below active year. It doesn't really matter to people here, most people in the U.S., unless it impacts the U.S. So we are in an active pattern. We will, I think, for a while be in a very active pattern. But if next year nothing hits the U.S., the perception is it's a dud. And my story and message has always been prepare every single year and don't let your guard down. Know that you just lucked out. Think about going to, Vegas or playing, blackjack or craps. You got the guy who's always winning. Most people don't win. The casino always wins. So Mother Nature will always win. Somebody is going to get hit big, but most people won't. It's just it's a matter of odds.
You have about a 2% chance every year of getting hit somewhere. That's about as good as it gets. You're right. Your thoughts?
So everybody in Florida had their hurricane plan tested. And some of their plans worked and some of them didn't. And the parts of your hurricane plan that didn't work, make sure it's ready for next year. Because it may not be next year, it may not be the year after, but it's going to happen again. And people tend to forget what worked and what didn't work. So I recommended to my audience, write down what worked and write down what didn't work and put it in your hurricane kit. because it may be 3 or 4 years when we have another big threat, it may be next year, but you want to know what worked, because it's not only getting through the storm, but it's getting through after the storm. It could either be a really bad camping experience, or it could be something much worse because you weren't prepared.
I actually think I always tell residents of Florida that we're all hurricane experts now. Because we've been through so many in the last few years. But there are a couple of challenges. One is this evacuation mess that we deal with every year, with people evacuating who don't need to evacuate, or evacuating that don't need to go to Orlando. I mean, the whole state was a mess with Irma from people evacuating. And to deal with this gas and supply issue, I mean, seriously, you couldn't get gas a week ahead of time. So those are important questions. And I know actually Florida this week is dealing with some of that. There's subtle changes. They're thinking of what was happening at like some of the gas stations is the regular gas was running out, but there was premium, but it was more expensive, and people were holding off, hoping that they would get the regular. Now they're going to hopefully bring that price down to the regular price, so there's not that hesitation, and they'll fill up. So maybe little things like that help a bit, but those are, I think, the challenges. 20 years ago, the challenge was don't put tape on your windows, and now we're much better off now. We're much smarter dealing with hurricanes, but we still have stuff to learn.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you very much. We've gone 15 minutes over, but it's been a terrific evening. So please, those in the room, round of applause for all the panelists tonight.